There we go. So come with me to the front line of climate action in the UK at the moment. Yeah, low traffic neighbourhoods going in across communities up and down the country. Quite like that one. So we're getting there. And there's lots of reasons to be cheerful, right? You know, we've had that emergency funding. We've got cities, not just Paris and Amsterdam, doing amazing things. We've got a new regulatory body like called Active Travel England on the way, the new design standards. Reasons to be cheerful. And yet, this is what's happening on the ground. Sabotage and a lot of anger in some communities. Accusations of gentrification and splitting communities down the middle. This was in Ealing, I think, at the weekend, hundreds of people marching against low traffic neighbourhoods. So up and down the country, they hang in the balance, and this happened on Friday. Wandsworth Council announced it was suspending its low traffic neighbourhood scheme. And this is being, in London, it's going to become a political football. You know, accusations against will be used in the fight for the mayoral elections coming up, I've got no doubt. When the Daily Mail starts writing about you, you know you've got problems. But it is worth remembering we've been here before. This was Walthamstow in 2015, where huge controversy before a low traffic neighbourhood went in. But in the end, that scheme went in, and it's now seen as a pioneer and hugely beneficial to the local community. So despite the backlash, there are a lot of schemes successfully going in, and in particular, places do seem to be learning, you know, how to get it right when they're doing it at pace. That's not necessarily easy. This is Bath, and I encourage you to look at what they're doing. Really interesting way that they're portraying low traffic neighbourhoods, how the community can get involved, how they're using data to decide where they're putting them in. By the way, there are links in all my slides, so you can go off and have a look at some of this yourself. But given the scale of change needed, there is no way that this kind of patchy rollout of low traffic neighbourhoods is going to get us anywhere near the carbon reductions that we need in the next few years. But I think it's interesting to think about, why is there so much opposition to these schemes when, you know, all the benefits are really quite profound? And I think it's because while there are some problems with, you know, implementation, really it's because there's a lot missing here. We're not taking a holistic, inclusive, people-centered approach to community change. We're missing out the people bit here. And while there is a need for more effective approaches, and I've got some links on this slide if you want to learn more about how to do this effectively, I'm going to talk more about behaviour change. You know, if we need 2,000% increases in cycling, we've got to make people want to walk or cycle. There are a lot of theories about behaviour change, and luckily I'm not going to go into them in this presentation. Suffice to say that most of them deal with individual change, and they sort of come from the public health realm. So, you know, I was looking at Cycling UK's behaviour change model, and it's focused on the individual. You know, how do we help people, an individual, want to cycle? The scale of change that we need, which in Greater Manchester is 1 million fewer car journeys a day, we need mass behaviour change. And so we need a different approach than just individual. How do we do mass behaviour change? Well, one thing that we don't do is, it's not all about facts and education. You do need that, but ultimately behaviour change at that scale is about showing these three things. You've got to show it's possible, you've got to show it's expected, and you've got to show that the effect is tangible. And again, there's a great TED Talk link there that you can find out more about the theory behind that. But you've also got to make it easy. And if we think about examples of successful mass behaviour change, you know, there are a few there. The most recent one, I guess, is the move to home working, online working. And I think a key thing to emphasise is that mass behaviour change happens because we set behavioural expectations. Attitudes follow behaviour, not the other way around. So taking those three kind of things, you know, what's possible? Well, this is why lockdown has sparked this debate about low traffic, because we showed it's possible. What's expected? is this happening in low traffic neighbourhoods? Well, this is the missing ingredient where schemes aren't working, because I don't think this is being got right. So there's an example here. The pictures are from Lambeth, where Claire Holland is the deputy leader, and Lambeth has really positioned its schemes really well. It's framed them well. It's communicated well. Where that's not happening, that's where the schemes aren't working. And then the third one is show the effect is tangible. So you can do that with graphs and evidence, which is good. You need that. But more importantly, you need pictures, you need actual real life evidence. And that's why I think school streets are really important for this change, because communities can see at a stroke the effect of removing cars. And also there's the moral high ground here. This is about children's health, and there's far less to oppose when it comes to school streets. A little word on facts. I think, you do need facts, but there's quite a lot of focus, too much focus on putting all the evidence out there. The evidence is important. In fact, if you don't have the evidence, you shouldn't be doing the scheme, but it's not going to convince opponents. It will help you with the middle ground. So, you need to get your facts out there, but it's not going to win you the argument. Take a cue from good customer service. So what customer service does is listen to criticisms. And I think this needs to happen with low traffic neighbourhoods, because it's a cue for the whole of the massive societal change that needs to happen, which is they're being seen as unfair and undemocratic, where the opposition is kind of landing. So we need to consider those accusations and change how we're doing things. And one way that we need to do that is that the messaging needs to be about not shall we do this, it's not a vote, it's not for a referendum, but how shall we do this? And communities that are getting this right, enabling communities to input into how should we do these schemes, that's where they'll succeed. And what you're looking for, this is kind of from psychology, is you're looking for adult to adult relationship, the dynamic. This is what you want people in the community to feel, they're being spoken to in this way. What's happening in a lot of these neighbourhoods is it's just arrived, nobody knew until the cones turned up, and you've created this parent-child dynamic, and we know what kids do when they're told they can't do something. A good example of how this is done well is the Climate Assembly UK, and there the 100 members of the Assembly that were met for many months and just returned last week were asked, how should the country reach net zero by 2050? Not should we, but how? And they came up with some far-reaching and very sensible, but also, quite profound recommendations, including some key principles, interestingly, around fairness and democracy. So these are key values that our society want. But also the format of the Assembly invested in the Assembly members and gave them collective responsibility for finding the right solutions. And that's what I think is crucial here, and what we need to use of all this massive societal change is coming our way. So as a campaigner, I think the challenge for us moved on from sort of influencing politicians and persuading on policy. We still need that, but some of those policies are now agreed, and we need to move to engaging hearts and minds of the general public. Two levers that are really central to this are political will and public support, and you need both. And in the places where this is working, political will is perhaps, leadership, and public support can follow. If you don't have political will, that's where you need to create the public support to then drive political will. So it's about hearts and minds, not just curbs and cones, which is perhaps how it is happening at the moment in some places. But in order to achieve this huge societal change, decarbonise transport and other sectors, we need to acknowledge what we're up against. There are whole industries making a lot of money built on selling us things that we either need to stop doing or reduce doing. So I want to kind of ask ourselves, what should we learn from those industries? How can we use the same tactics to help people want to do things? And to do that, we need to acknowledge something that isn't, I don't think, being used in a lot of this planning, and that is human nature, and that is emotion. So learning from a lot of advertising, let's take cars. We don't advertise cars like this. That was, 1910 or something. We advertise cars like this. you know, they're liberating, they're protecting, they're a status symbol, despite the fact, oh, and here's, you know, look at this advert, there's no facts in that whatsoever, it's just pure, blatant playing on emotion. And yet the facts are, we know that cars are killing us. My favourite stat from this one, you know, the average speed in a city is 6 miles an hour for a car. So they're not exactly as billed, are they? Which is why there's a huge campaign to try and perhaps, you know, redress the view of cars. So how could we use our knowledge of human behaviour triggers, not to sell cars, but to make us want to walk and cycle? Because if we're going to get 2,000 more people cycling, as is the challenge in West Yorkshire, that's what we need to do. So we need to acknowledge it's driven by emotion. There are some key elements here that we need to take into account. So advertisers, marketing, use knowledge of behaviour science. And a key one is about our fear of social exclusion. So the best way to persuade people to save energy in their home is not to help them save money, but to actually tell them that 77% of their neighbours are already doing it, because people fear being being excluded, being different. So this advert here probably didn't work very well, despite the fact that when asked, people probably said, well, yes, I would save money if I knew it was helping the planet. And the reason for that is that people actually don't tell the truth when they're asked by market researchers, and that's because they want to be liked. So that's why the Brexit vote perhaps was unexpected, because all the polls running up to it, people hadn't been telling the truth to pollsters because they didn't want to convey exactly how they really feel, for fear of that social exclusion.
What's 1 minute, Claire? Would that be all right?
Pardon?
You could wrap up in 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay. Second key point is design. So how do schemes look? This is a men's urinal. You don't want spend money cleaning up your bathrooms, give men something to aim at. Here's some other design objects designed to make you do stuff. Third one is rewards, and there are some clever ways you can reward people, but more effectively than rewards is loss aversion, and this is used in a lot of advertising. You'll see from the one on the left, making people feel they're going to miss out on something, and that's because the pain from loss is far greater than our pleasure from gaining something. And this is what is not being taken into account in this huge societal changes that we need to make. We need to understand that people do not like losing things, and figure out how to address that. One way is to make something the default option, so make it easy. And we're just not doing that. Amazon Prime have figured it out, and loads of online advertisers, but why isn't pavement parking a default ban? Why isn't the speed limit 60? All these things need to happen. Great example from the US here, how to save money. Involved people opting in to save money in the future. So they didn't lose anything now, they didn't lose it now. Money was saved from future pay rises. So really interesting behaviour science at play. And this is some of the things that we need to use across the sectors that we're looking to change. So what we don't seem to be doing as a society is taking a view across a sector like transport. What are all the changes that need to happen, and how are we working together to make that happen? And that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to build active travel into our everyday life, and not see it as a separate activity. So how do we make people want to walk and cycle? Well, one way is, like, how much do you want to walk down that pavement? I do. Perhaps we tell people that 65% of kids travel to that school by bike or foot or scooter. Perhaps we give out free bikes. 2 million kids, £100 a bike. That's cheaper than the cycling schemes being introduced in Manchester. Make it fun. That's a school street. People need to see how the behaviour change, the modal shift, is going to benefit their communities. That's a high street, spending more money, benefiting local businesses. That's a city centre, a nicer place to go. So finally, how do we sell it? Well, this is how we're currently selling walking and cycling in Manchester, which is, we're asking people to do their bit, and we're telling them that, have you thought about walking and cycling? Which it's not going to get people walking and cycling unless we think that it's never occurred to them before. So that's not the way that you do behaviour change. Some of the things that we could try is, as I've said, the tactics that are being used to sell a lifestyle, to sell community benefits. So, you know, maybe something like this, a bit more aspirational. And in general, make people feel, acknowledge the emotion in the room. Because when it comes to change, if we're going to make these massive societal changes, we've got to acknowledge human nature. And that involves, you know, selling the benefits to a community and involving the community in those changes. So that's me. The road is open and it's definitely better by bike.